So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You know, some of the most profound realizations I've had in my life are also the most simple. A major one, for example, is the realization that just because I think something doesn't mean it's true. Just because I think something doesn't mean it's true. Ladies, for us guys, this one tends to be particularly difficult to accept. The problem that realization leads to, for me, is the question of, well, how do I discern which thoughts are true and which thoughts are false? It isn't easy. I've got this inner narrator, this self-chatter, this never-ending soundtrack of a voice that, although I think it's somewhere in my head, I use that term, I've never found it there. I don't quite know where it is, but I'm pretty sure that it's real. But I know that everything it tells me isn't true. And so what I have to do is listen. The only way that I know to discern which of my thoughts are true and which aren't true, especially to me, is to listen to them. Maybe ask them some questions. Maybe sit down and have a cup of coffee with them. But to really listen to what they have to say so that I can find what is true for myself. Our theme for 2015 is going deeper, or even deeper. And this month we're going deeper into this topic of listening. And so although I'll be talking some about how we listen better to one another, I really want to focus on how we listen to our interior dialogue, how we listen to ourselves. Because my belief is when we have come to a point where we can really hear and understand and accept ourselves, it opens the doorway to connect and listen to those whom we love and all of life around us in a more profound and complete way. But listening to ourselves is harder than we might think. There's a new book out, fresh off the presses, by Dan Harris, who's an anchor for Nightline. I think he does some weekend Good Morning America shows too. And he's written a book called 10% Happier, How I Tamed the Voice in My Head, Reduced Stress Without Losing My Edge, and Found Self-Help That Actually Works, a true story. And he has, for a modern spiritual book, self-help book, my favorite opening line, which goes like this, I'm editing it a little. He says, I initially wanted to call this book, The Voice in My Head is an A-Hole. However, that title was deemed inappropriate for a man whose day job requires him to abide by FCC DCC standards. So he goes on to describe the role of the inner narrator in our lives. To be clear, I'm not talking about hearing voices. I'm talking about the internal narrator, the most intimate part of our lives. The voice comes braying in as soon as we open our eyes in the morning and then heckles us all day with an air horn. It's a fever swamp of urges, desires, and judgments. It's fixated on the past and the future, to the detriment of the here and the now. It's what has us reaching into the fridge when we're not hungry, losing our temper when we know it's not really in our best interest, and pruning our inboxes when we're ostensibly engaged in conversation with other human beings. Our inner chatter isn't all bad, of course. Sometimes it's creative, generous, or funny. But if we don't pay close attention, which very few of us are taught how to do, it can be a malevolent puppeteer. I think all of us know at some level that it's through this inner narrator that we will either achieve and experience freedom or build ourselves a prison that we can never set ourselves free from. For Harris, not to give away the ending, but he finds in his practice Buddhist meditation is something that helps him deal or cope or settle down his inner narrator, which I disagree with, as I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. And that has helped him to be 10% happier. And that I love the title because It gets us away from this idea that meditation is supposed to make you some holy person and become super enlightened and some sort of super extra holy, probably really boring person to hang out with. He's saying that through meditation, he's 10% happier than he was before. And for all of us, if we can get a meditation or spiritual practice going and become a little bit more happy, a little bit more content, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more, we will have really changed our lives in a profound way. Where I disagree with Harris a little bit is this idea of what meditation and listening to ourselves is for. So a lot of people start meditating and they think that it's going to help them stop their thinking. I want to stop my mind. Which to me is kind of like turning off your computer and saying, look, now it works just fine. I don't want to stop my thinking. I want to think more clearly. I don't want to get rid of my mind. I want to learn to trust my mind. For all the people that I work with, especially on a one-on-one, this is the central difficulty and challenge for myself at times too. I sometimes don't feel safe, even when I'm with myself. The self-criticisms can run so deep, the judgments and the sensationalism can move so far that I don't even trust being in my own mind. I can't even be a safe, supportive environment for myself. That's why listening for me to myself has become such an important practice. Why meditation has become such an important practice to learn to build a rapport with myself so I can start recognizing that my inner narrator and what it's telling me is based more upon goodwill for myself and its deepest truth I know to be so about life, as opposed to like walking through a field full of landmines of that self-criticism and self-judgment that can come up at any time. And how many of us have experienced great consequences in our lives due to this simple, invisible, yet powerful thing called our own inner narrator, all of our self-chatter. A lot of us, right? Maybe it's something you didn't say but told yourself that you shouldn't, that you wish you would have said. Maybe it's something you did say to somebody that you wish you hadn't said. There are all sorts of actions and inactions, choices and not choices, that is a choice too, by the way, that have an effect on our lives that are based upon what that inner chatter is telling us. And we've all had moments, I'm guessing, where we regret or have experienced being possessed by the negative self-chatter in a way where we almost acted against our own self-interests. This happened for Dan Harris on national television. And he tells us his story. He says, according to Nielsen ratings data, 5,019 million people saw me lose my mind. I was sitting at a small satellite anchor desk inside the second story of ABC's glass encased studio in New York's Times Square. On the other side of the room was the main anchor desk, home to the show's co-hosts, Charles Gibson and Diane Sawyer. Charlie tossed it over to me. We're going to go now to Dan Harris, who's at the news desk. Dan? At this point, I was supposed to read a series of 6 voiceovers, short news items about 20 seconds apiece, over which the control room would roll video clips. It started out fine. Good morning, Charlie and Diane. Thank you, I said in my best morning anchor voice, chipper yet authoritative. But right in the middle of the second voiceover, it hit. Out of nowhere, I felt like I was being stabbed in the brain with raw animal fear. A paralytic wave of panic rolled up through my shoulders, over the top of my head, then melted down the front of my face. The universe was collapsing in on me. My heart started to gallop. My mouth dried up. My palms oozed sweat. So it may have not happened on national TV, but can you relate to this experience? And not to say that all anxiety attacks are the result of self-chatter, but for Harris, it was the central reason. The stories and the narratives and the criticisms he was giving himself was holding him back. I remember being at this church almost 10 years ago, before I graduated ministerial school, and having one of those moments. I had been asked to give my first Easter talk. I know Reverend Audrey was there because she gave me the Bible afterwards because I misquoted a bunch of names. She was helping me out. But I remember the first words of my talk were, "Who was Jesus?" So I got up and I said, "Who was Jesus?" And in that moment I had no clue. So I kept repeating, "Who was Jesus?" Almost to get the crowd to let me know. And I know in that moment there was a lot of self-centeredness going on, a lot of ego, a lot of fear that was holding me back from being in my own flow of clarity about what I wanted to say. I was giving in to that self-chatter. And this can happen for us in public moments, but it can happen in private ones too, where that inner narrator lays hold of us. Again, however, and I'll get to this again, I don't think this inner narrator is a bad thing. Because I think, in truth, hiding just underneath the surface is always our good and our empowerment. Now, I don't believe in such a thing as a bad listener. I don't believe in bad listeners. I believe in occupied listeners. I believe in folks who have a lot of trouble focusing in on what's in front of them because they allow themselves to get distracted by other things that are going on, or they can't help it. You may be talking to me, but I may not be listening to you because I'm listening to that clock inside my head telling me where I need to go to next, or how stunning the girl looks who walks behind you, or the judgment I have about you, or what it is that I want to say. It takes a lot of focus to listen to what's in front of us. And this is where the gift of meditation comes in so serenely and so powerfully. Now, meditation is not the technique of listening to ourselves, but what I would argue is it's the technique that puts us in the best position where we can actually hear ourselves. Meditation is about focusing on an object in the present moment with equanimity and patience. Most traditionally, it's the breath. So we can all breathe, I hope. Yeah. But you just bring your attention to your breath. You don't have to make it extra holy or anything like that. You just bring your attention to it, and the idea is when the self-narrator's talking, you don't try to push it away, but you just refocus yourself back on your breath. And if there's a cell phone that goes off, that's fine. You notice it and you go back to your breath. And if you're thinking about what's for lunch, that's fine. You just bring yourself back to your breath, and that's meditation. That's the practice part of meditation. And then there's what we would hope would be the effect of meditation, the result of meditation, which should be a sense of being in the present moment. The purpose of meditation is to help us be in the here and now, because the here and now gives us this really interesting opportunity to have not mind over matter, but mind over mind. It gives us the opportunity to be what Buddhists call the witness, or a level of awareness where we can now, in a present state, not in a character, but in a present state, sincerely listen to any aspect of our lives around us. And this is where we have the opportunity, or I know in my practice, I've had the opportunity to listen to myself. Now, I would like to say that I usually orate great speeches and ideas and thoughts when I listen to myself, but it's not generally true. I usually don't like what I'm about to hear, because sometimes we have to step through some of that muck, some of that negative self-chatter. And I can think of so many areas of my life where I've allowed beliefs that I never really listened to, because I didn't listen to them, transmute and affect my life in a negative way. It's Valentine's Day this month, so just using one example of relationships and the beliefs that I've formed about relationships over time throughout my life. Some very egotistical, like my partner has to be perfect in every way. Some kind of from abandonment issues. I don't think I'm capable of being in a relationship. I don't know how anyone would ever love just me and want to be with just me. And so on and so on. And I can think about how all that self-chatter, all of that talking to myself about relationships, through all of my relationships, have kept me from actually being present in relationships. It's a little embarrassing. It makes me feel a little guilty at times. I don't know, I hope you relate. But what happens is, by listening to those things, I'm able to see what's true and what's false, or what's part true, or what used to be true but doesn't need to be true any longer, or what can be true if I step into it in a greater way. It's my hypothesis, and by saying that I mean that I might be very wrong, but I would argue that all of our self-chatter, especially the negative self-chatter, is a defense mechanism we create for ourselves from listening to ourselves, from hearing what it is that we really believe, from hearing what it is that we really think, from feeling what it is that we really feel. Sometimes the self-chatter is just emanations, little walls we put up to keep us from listening to ourselves. And that's why I think it's so important to recognize that even some of the negative thoughts, even the thoughts that come out of the gutter, can have some value when we listen. Where is that coming from? Why are you telling me that? What is it that you really want me to know? And my belief, based upon the principles of this church, is that if we listen more and more deeply, we will ultimately come into contact with our own power. That hiding behind some of this negative self-chatter isn't just an inner child looking for love, for example, but is our creativity, is our uniqueness, is the ability to empower ourselves and empower our relationships if we could understand what we really feel and think, so we could actually communicate with other people around us in a more honest, sincere, and authentic way. Harris speaks to many things in his book, and why I like his book so much is he's a reporter, so he has the opportunity to meet with self-help gurus like Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra, and through his own path he really likes a lot of their ideas, but they're not for him because he finds them to be folks who kind of think that they're enlightened in some way and never get mad or ticked off when the garbage truck is loud outside, that type of thing. So he doesn't relate with them. He eventually finds Buddhism as a path for himself. But the other thing that I love that he does in his book is that he really studies the science of meditation. And so he shares, meditation, once part of the counterculture, has now entered the scientific mainstream. It has been subjected to thousands of studies, suggesting an almost laughably long list of health benefits, including salutary effects on the following: major depression, drug addiction, binge eating, stress among cancer patients, ADHD, asthma, psoriasis, and he shares many more than that. Studies also indicated that meditation reduced levels of stress hormones, boosted the immune system, made office workers more focused, and improved test scores on the GRE. Harris goes on to share the studies about meditation's effects on our neurology, on our brain. And for me, the powerful part of that data isn't just how your brain responds during meditation, but how it's different after you've meditated. For me, that's where the real powerful results of meditation come in. You take that 10 minutes in your morning, but where it really shows up is in your interactions throughout your day, in your relationships, in your clarity of thought. Yet it's up to us to create that space and that time to listen more deeply to ourselves. And like I was saying before, the deeper we listen, even if we have to trek through some scary places, even if we have to trek through some self-judgments, if we can do so and accept ourselves, not judge ourselves, but really listen, we will find our divine connection. We'll find what's most sacred to us, calling us to live a greater life. I love it in this deep but profound way that the great Catholic monastic Thomas Merton put it. He said, "The purest faith has to be tested by silence, in which we listen for the unexpected, in which we are open to what we do not yet know, and in which we slowly and gradually prepare for the day when we will reach out to a new level of being with God." Through listening more deeply with ourselves, we give ourselves that opportunity to not just connect at a deeper level with ourselves, but with everyone around us. We can move past what I call the defective experience of mediocrity or boredom or a lot of types of depression, to step into a feeling of at-one-ment and creative energy with our lives where we feel we're in rapport with our lives again. Have you ever been sitting down with someone you love and care about and not have a word to say? Is it because there's nothing to be said? Or is it because there's an energy that's missing there? An honesty, a listening, a being present. It's true within ourselves as well. We may think that we have nothing to say to ourselves. We know ourselves so well. But there is more. There's always more. And as we cultivate it within ourselves, we can cultivate it with everyone around us as well. My goal in my life is to always listen to my inner narrator, no matter what it has to say. To always listen. And yet to have a little bit better control over what I actually say, what I actually do, what I actually choose. I sure mess up a lot. But I think when we can come into that balance, I think it was Gandhi who said that happiness is when your thoughts, your actions, and whatever it is, your feelings are in harmony. There's something about being in harmony with ourselves that allows us to listen more keenly to all that's around us and really hear what life has to say. So to close with a thought from Frederick Buechner, the great Presbyterian minister, listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery that it is, in the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way to the holy and hidden heart of it, because in the last analysis, all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace. So I thank you for your time this morning, everybody. It's great to see you.